we bring you Killer Wise, episode 31, Snake Handler. These are the actual case facts against Lindley Rennick, who murdered her own husband. Isn't trust a bitch? Columbia, Missouri, an hour's drive from St. Louis, Missouri, a college town famous as the fourth most populous city in Missouri, but also made famous for the murder of one Mr. Ben Rennick. But how did this happy-go-lucky snake expert and husband die? Could it have been at the hands of his beautiful bleached-blonde wife, Lindley? To find out the awful truth, we must rewind this story through dense mountain passes, shrouded in pea-soup fog that lifts only late in the morning sun. Rewind, yes, back to a rural farm road in Montgomery County, Columbia, called Route RB. Here you will find a place where few uninvited people travel, save for the couple that own the world's largest snake handling facility worth millions of dollars at Rennick Farms and their extended family members. That is, except on the morning of the murder. There we witnessed three key figures that will take center stage in the ensuing murder investigation. A mysterious, uninvited, dark-headed figure onto the property. An enormous Burmese python. And a wife with some pretty radical ulterior motives. After being shot 8 times, Mr. Benjamin Rennick now lay dying on the floor. We'll be back in just a minute. You're watching M&N, the Ben's channel. After Mr. Rennick had been shot a total of 8 times, with 4 of those shots being in his back and the kill shot being fired into his skull, he died within minutes. He would bleed out on the floor while his wife would get in the car with the mysterious figure that showed up on the property to plan her escape and alibi. But what was her motive for wanting her husband dead? In a word, greed. To say that money was the root of all evil would be an understatement for the case of a wife who stood to gain $1 million insurance policy. Separately, the land that the snake's farm sat on was worth around $1 million, and the snake collection worth $1.5 million by itself. In a marriage that had spanned less than 3 short years, Miss Rennick on this day was successful at killing her husband to gain $3 million. I say she was successful on this day because she failed the first time she tried to kill him. That's right, the first time. Previously, she had enlisted the efforts of her co-worker, Miss Ashley Shaw, at the failing massage parlor she owned to get her the Percocet. Now, Percocet can cause respiratory distress and death when taken in high doses or when combined with other substances, especially alcohol or other illicit drugs such as heroin or cocaine. Now, Lynn Lee used these pills to poison her husband's energy drink so she could benefit financially from his death. Unfortunately for Miss Rennick, the only thing that happened to Mr. Rennick is that he got violently ill but lived to see another day. But she was not willing to repeat her mistakes, and she applauded herself as she rode away from the reptile farm on that particular day after she shot her husband in cold blood. Now, Miss Rennick also, along with Michael Humphrey, now driving away from the farm, the man she recruited to supply her with the gun she used to kill Ben in cold blood, was headed back to her massage parlor now. There, her co-worker, Miss Ashley Shaw, was awaiting her instructions and reporting on her attempt to take her husband's life. Now, upon arriving at the massage parlor, Ashley would close up the location for a couple of hours, while she and Lindley went into the shower stall to thoroughly scrub her down to get rid of all evidence that she was ever involved in the killing of her husband. Now, when she was finished, she would get her story straight with her two cohorts before they would separately leave in three different directions, with her ex-boyfriend taking home the murder weapon. Now, as part of her twisted plan, Miss Rennick would pick up her two children from school, carefully pretending that it was a normal day. It was her intention to have them as an alibi when she discovered her husband's body. Now, as the car pulled up to the snake house on the property where she killed him earlier that same day, she allowed the children to go into where his body was laying. Now, if you haven't been watching the Killer Wives episodes up to this point, you might not know that this old hat to use for your children, family, or friends as unwilling alibis to keep you off of death row and certainly out of prison.
You're watching MNN, the Men's Channel.
And on this day, Miss Rennick's children would be her first alibi. But no one sees this coming. Who even knows this family? In fact, if you look at the pictures of that family, you would know that the love that Ben gave to his wife and why he didn't deserve what happened to him. So you might know Ben better. I thought I would show you some pictures of how he actually loved this woman, who shot him in the back along with the love he had for his daughter and her son from a prior relationship. Take a look at these pictures. From the outside, one would never know that Ben and his wife were having problems. From the beginning, he took care of her child from a previous relationship, long before they had their own child, a beautiful young girl. In every Facebook posting that Ben had, at least included a picture of his wife, if not of both of them. When they went on vacations, they enjoyed each other's company. Family and friends never saw this coming. By all accounts, they were a completely happy couple. I guess it's hard to see from the outside what a family is really like until the murder investigation. Ben brought his wife into his hobby, which became a major business worth over $1 million. The reptile and snake breeding facility in the United States, one of the largest by any account. She worked alongside with Ben, and after a time, she wanted to start her own massage business, and he financed that business. This was not a man that hated his wife. On the farm that afternoon, Miss Rennick ensured that she seemed the loving wife by putting a performance of shock in front of her frightened children. She then immediately called Mr. Rennick's brother, followed by a call to 911. The time was now 6:30 p.m., and Mr. Rennick had been dead for many hours in that reptile house on the property. Now, Mr. Rennick's brother was the first to arrive on the scene, and he would report that when he did show up, that Lynn Lee was running around in a fog. He would recall her speech as unintelligible. He said nothing she said made any sense. He thought she might have been traumatized. At that point, he made it his mission to keep the children out of the reptile house so they would not have to see their father's body any further in this particular condition. But he was now covered with his brother's blood from turning him over. When he found Ben, he had been face down in a coagulated pool of his own blood. Now, once he did turn him over, he saw that his brother's skull was crushed. This was either from being shot by a high-caliber weapon or when his head hit the concrete as he was falling to his death. Either way, Ben's brother had no clue that Ben had been shot. He simply believed that Ben's skull was crushed along with heavy bleeding from a snake catching him off guard enough to kill him. And after all, Ben had an anaconda on the property that was at least 20 feet long. The anaconda's squeezing force is about 90 psi, and that is enough to kill human beings easily. In fact, when the police arrived on the scene, they were informed that there might be a loose, aggressive snake on the premises and had to watch out for it. Now, armed with this knowledge, the police went into the snake house after the coroner arrived with shotguns and weapons drawn. To this end, they protected the coroner as he started to process Ben's body for wounds and identification. Now, as the coroner looked for puncture wounds on Mr. Rennick's body, he noticed a bullet cartridge at the base of a metal mobile shelf. He noticed another empty cartridge under the armpit of Mr. Rennick. When the coroner took a break from the warm temperature in the snake house to go outside for a break, he was stopped and questioned by Ben's brother about the murder snake. The coroner at that time said this was no death by a snake, but a death by homicide. Now, Ben's brother, hearing this, was shocked, and his wife pretended to be also. Due to the changing nature of Ben's death, police on the scene moved immediately to a GSR or gunshot residue test. They asked his wife first, would she submit to the test, and she did so willingly. She did this without hesitancy because, if you can remember, she had recently been scrubbed clean by her co-worker Ashley Shaw at the massage parlor, so Lynn Lee wasn't worried. Ben's brother, knowing he had nothing to do with this homicide, consented to the same. These tests were immediately forwarded through the chain of custody to the crime lab, and the results will be back very shortly. But I don't have to tell you that both tests will come back completely negative, because unfortunately they did. For now, Miss Rennick had just gotten away with murder. But that is not the only thing she got away with. For many years prior to Ben's death, Lynn Lee had been a serial adulteress. She had several affairs while she was married to Benjamin, with the last being 2 short days before she murdered him. In fact, she continued this affair with the same gentleman, which culminated in the birthing of his baby a year later. Now, ironically enough, she invited an ex-boyfriend from a relationship that she had 7 years earlier to assist her with killing her husband while she was sleeping with another man. Now, this chick was off the chain. Within 24 hours of her husband's death, she was on the phone to the insurance company trying to get access to the millions of dollar policy settlement. Now, what naive Miss Rennick did not know was that when someone is murdered, everyone within that person's home who could have a motive to gain from their death has to be cleared by the police department. Then and only then can a killer wife prosper from the death of her supportive husband who tolerated her crap while she slept around with everyone behind his back while playing that she was a decent wife. Now, a day after the murder, Miss Rennick was interviewed at the police station as to her husband's enemies or who might have done this to her husband. At one point in the interview, she even turned the police attention onto Ben's brother. Yes, that same brother that she telephoned about his death, who she asked to rush over and comfort her and the children. I guess that day there was plenty of room underneath the bus to throw the ones you love completely under. Now, during intense questioning, the police asked both the widow and Ben's brother to take a lie detector test, to which both consented. Now, Ben's brother told the police that he was willing to give them the shirt off of his back if they asked for it, and he did. He consented to his shirt the test for the blood splatter or the gunshot residue, and neither were present. Now, but when it came time for Lynn Lee, she failed that lie detector test miserably and was told as much by the police. but her hands tested negative for gunshot residue as well as her clothing for the same. Now, most unfortunately, in jurisprudence, you cannot arrest someone solely on the basis that they fall and they fail a lie detector test. But it would have been a greater choice in this case to do so. Now, police may have not been able to arrest Lindley for lying, but now she was elevated to the prime suspect in this particular case. Now, within a matter of days, Widow Rennick was supported by Ben's snake community. That community witnessed Ben's decency firsthand from many trade shows and online teaching classes he gave for free. Snake handlers from all across the United States came together to have an online auction of his remaining snakes to benefit Lindley and the children. That community had no idea that Lindley was a prime suspect on that murder case and that she failed a polygraph test. The auction to support Ben's widow raised thousands of dollars for his killer and his wife.
You're watching M&N, the Men's Channel.
When the dust was settled, shortly thereafter, Lindley placed the family's 74-acre farm up for sale, while Ben's brother still lived on that farm. She pocketed almost $1 million and skipped town immediately. She would remain free woman for a couple of years until one fate-filled day. That day would come after the arrest of a man she put a restraining order against. The man she was fighting in child custody court. That's right, the very same man she had engaged in an adulterous relationship with 2 days prior to killing her husband. At this point, their 2-year-old relationship had begun to sour, and she was looking to move on and take his child with her. But her lover wasn't having any of that. No siree. He went out of his way to call the detectives investigating Ben's murder case and decided to rat her out. You see, apparently, loose lips sink ships, and the widow Rennick had some pretty loose lips. Apparently, feeling comfortable about getting away with murder, she confided in her living lover exactly what she did that particular day in order to kill Ben. He said she told him that she enlisted her ex-boyfriend to bring a gun to shoot her husband at the snake house. She said that her ex-boyfriend at one point got cold feet and couldn't go through with it. She said her ex then gave her the pistol and said it was up to her if she wanted Ben dead. She revealed how her ex waited outside as she went in and shot Ben 8 times without fear or remorse. She went on to say how she went to her massage parlor immediately afterwards to wash up and how she failed the polygraph test. Now, once again, armed with this type of knowledge, the police moved to arrest her and her ex-co-worker and her ex-boyfriend. Now, they made a plan to cut a deal with both of them in order to get Lindley in prison. Then they gave her ex-co-worker immunity from prosecution, so she spilled the beans because she couldn't be arrested anymore. Like there was no tomorrow she did this. She told about how they poisoned his drink, and when that didn't work, they made plans to shoot him. Now, shortly thereafter, an arrest warrant was sworn out against Miss Rennick. She was arrested and sentenced to a pretrial confinement. But that didn't hold her in jail for long. Her ex-co-worker was freed as well as her boyfriend up to his trial date. But Miss Slick Lady Rennick had her lawyer request that she too be released up to her date in court. Now, she was saying that she was the mother of a child. She was somebody's daughter, and she's a decent person who never got in trouble before. But there was still room left to be shocked in this case because that is precisely what the judge gave her based on her lawyers saying all these decent things about this particular murder. And she had never been in trouble before. And not only was she released on her own recognizance, but without any bail or ankle monitoring for an entire year up to her trial. But I guess this is the whole premise behind the monopoly game of get out of jail free card. But it's virtually impossible to get out of jail if you're up for murder one. But over that next year, her ex-boyfriend's trial was held and he was convicted of murder one. He was facing life in jail without parole. At that point is when he decided to do the honorable thing and come forward with the murder weapon that had been missing since Ben's death. Now, producing this weapon was a shock to Lindley's attorney and broke the case wide open. At Lindley's trial, her ex-co-worker testified against her, as well as her imprisoned ex-boyfriend, He gladly testified against a woman who was the cause of him spending his life in jail for murder he did not commit. Now, lastly, her current boyfriend had his day in court to testify all she had told him. Ms. Lindley Rennick was facing life in jail without parole. But in the state of Missouri, it is up to the jury on how many years you will face. Now, the jury came back with a verdict of second-degree murder instead of first-degree murder, which it should have. Now, this was with the intent to harm or kill. Lindley received 13 years for second-degree murder plus 3 years for a weapons charge. Miss Lindley Rennick only received a short term for killing her husband, but she lost all the money, the farm, her children, her husband, her freedom, and all of the men she could have potentially used as boyfriends and lovers in the future. Now, even during confinement, Ms. Rennick never released her grasp on stealing from Ben's estate. She sued her dead husband's estate for $15,000 settlement plus a monthly payment of $4,025. Amazing. You have to watch out for these particular wives. For Killer Wives, this is Charles Rivers. Join us again next time for episode 32. Thank you.